It was a Friday night Midwest sports bar. Neon Bud Light signs buzzing the game on mute in the background. My crew, Mike, Sarah, Tom, half drunk, mid-laugh. That's when Lauren cleared her throat, smirked, and dropped it. I cheated. The words hit the table like a shotgun blast. Not anger, not shock, just silence. And then she twisted the knife. I needed a real man, not someone wasting weekends under a truck that still doesn't run. Mike raised his glass, savage but honest. Sarah muttered, "We saw it coming." Even Tom, the guy who slept on my couch for months, just looked away. My so-called friends clinked glasses with her, while I sat there, the punchline to a joke I never signed up for. I didn't yell, didn't break a bottle. I just tossed my truck keys in the air, caught them, and smiled. When I walked out, their laughter got louder. What they didn't hear, the plan that just formed in my head, the sound of glass on glass still rings in my head. Mike lifted his beer high, grinning like it was some kind of victory. Savage but honest, he laughed, the foam spilling over his knuckles as he leaned across the table toward her. "Sorry." Sarah shook her head, pretending to be shocked, but I caught the curve of a smile tugging at her lips. She whispered, "We all saw this coming, like it was an inside joke I wasn't invited to." Tom didn't say a word, he just kept his eyes on the table, tapping his finger against the wood, pretending he didn't notice me staring at him. The guy who once crashed on my couch when he had nowhere else to go now couldn't even meet my eyes. Their laughter swelled, the kind that vibrates in your chest, whether you want it to or not. It wasn't just her betrayal anymore. It was theirs. I didn't give them the outburst they were waiting for. No broken glass, no curse words, no scene to turn into another story they'd laugh about tomorrow. I just sat there, still as stone watching. Lauren leaned back in her chair, lips curled into that practiced smirk, like humiliating me in front of the people I once called family, made her the hero of the night. Her eyes darted across the table, searching for approval, needing it, feeding on it. I noticed the details no one else did, the twitch in her jaw, when the laughter peaked the way she gripped her drink, a little too tight, the desperation hiding behind her performance. She wasn't celebrating strength. She was masking emptiness. And me. I just let the silence stretch long enough to make them uncomfortable, long enough for them to realize I wasn't playing the role they'd cast me in. I was already somewhere else in my head. I reached into my pocket and felt the familiar weight of my truck keys, cold metal against my palm, steady grounding. I let them dangle for a second, then tossed them lightly into the air, caught them with a snap that cut through the laughter. Every head at the table turned for just a moment, expecting a blow-up, a fight, a collapse. They didn't get it. I stood slow and calm, chair scraping against the sticky floor. Lauren tilted her head, waiting for the explosion that never came. Mike raised his brows. Sarah bit her lip like she wanted to say something, but thought better of it. Tom still couldn't meet my eyes. I gave them one last look, not anger, not pain, just clarity. Then I smiled. A real smile. I pushed open the door, the neon light bleeding out into the night. Behind me, their laughter grew louder, desperate almost. But outside, in the cool Midwest air, I finally breathed. The door swung shut behind me with a hollow thud, and their laughter spilled out one last time before it was swallowed by the night. Louder, sharper, like they needed the sound to confirm I was gone. For a second, I stood there under the buzzing neon sign, the cool Midwest air cutting through the heat still clinging to my skin. My hands tightened around the keys, the metal pressing into my palm until it left marks. Inside, I knew they were already rewriting the story, me as the fool Lauren, as the bold truth-teller, the rest of them as her loyal chorus. Let them. The silence out here was heavier, but it was mine. No witnesses, no audience, no stage. Just the hum of traffic down the street and the faint smell of fried food from the kitchen vent. I walked toward my truck, each step steady, my chest lighter than it had been in months. Something had shifted. The next morning, sunlight bled through the blinds, sharp and unforgiving. My head was clear, no hangover, no regret, just the memory of that bar echoing like a bad song. I reached for my phone on the nightstand screen, lighting up before my thumb even touched it. 32 missed calls. Same number, same name. Lauren. The sight of it didn't sting the way she hoped it would. It didn't feel like proof of love or guilt or anything romantic. It felt like noise, loud, frantic noise clawing for attention. Missed calls stacked on top of each other, like the bar scene replaying itself in digital form. I set the phone face down on the dresser and stared at the ceiling. No apologies from friends, no explanations, just her voice trying to bleed through the silence I had given her. And for the first time, I realized silence was the only weapon I needed. I leaned back on the bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, and the phone still buzzing faintly in the background. Instead of answering, my mind drifted to the first time I saw her. A small college town cafe, the kind with wobbly tables and mismatched mugs. She sat by the window, black nail polish chipped at the edges, a paperback copy of The Bell Jar open in front of her. I made some awkward comment about the book, expecting her to ignore me. Instead, she looked up, smirked, and said, "Only depressed people read this in public." Then she smiled quick and mischievous, like she had just let me in on a secret. That moment stuck. The way the afternoon light cut across her face, the chipped silver ring on her thumb, the energy that pulled me in. It wasn't just attraction, it felt like recognition, like finding something I didn't know I was searching for. Back then, it was simple. Nights stretched long and endless, the two of us driving down empty back roads with the windows rolled down, music too loud for the old speakers to handle. Lauren would rest her bare feet on the dash, laughing at jokes that only made sense to us, the kind that got funnier the more tired we were. Sometimes we'd park by the lake headlights, cutting through the dark water, and she'd fall asleep against my shoulder like it was the safest place in the world. She used to whisper, "You're my peace," my anchor, as if I had the power to keep her steady when life got too heavy. We didn't have money. We didn't have a plan. But it didn't matter. Takeout containers scattered in the back seat, the smell of gasoline on my hands from hours in the garage, her smile glowing in the dim dashboard light. For a while, that was enough. The garage was always my sanctuary. Concrete floor stained with oil tools scattered across an old wooden bench, and that rusted-out '92 Civic parked dead center, like a patient waiting on a surgeon. I'd slide under the chassis flashlight in my mouth, grease coating my hands, chasing the dream of bringing it back to life. Lauren would sit cross-legged on a milk crate nearby, a soda can in one hand, radio playing low in the background. Whenever I reached out, she'd pass me a wrench or a socket without me even asking, like she knew the rhythm of my work better than I did. Sometimes she'd tease me, "You're wasting your weekends under a car that'll never run." But then she'd hum along with the music, staying until I finally crawled out, sweat-streaked and smiling. Those nights felt unshakable, like the smell of gasoline and the sound of her laugh could hold the whole world together. One night, the Civic finally coughed to life for a few minutes before stalling again. I laughed, covered in grease, half defeated but proud. Lauren was leaning against the doorway of the garage, arms crossed, watching me like I'd just pulled off a miracle. She walked over, knelt beside me, and pressed her forehead against my shoulder. "You're my peace." She whispered, her voice soft enough that it almost blended into the hum of the old radio. "My anchor." The words landed deeper than she probably realized. For a guy who had spent years trying to prove himself on jobs that paid too little, projects that never seemed to finish her, saying that made me feel like I was finally enough. Like I didn't have to chase approval anywhere else. I held on to that moment, that sentence, like it was proof that what we had was solid. I believed it. Maybe too much. It started small, almost invisible if you weren't paying attention. "Girls' night," she'd say, slipping into a black dress I hadn't seen in months, perfume hanging in the air long after the door shut. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone needs space, right? But then the text started. "Don't wait up. Short. Cold." Like a period at the end of a sentence I didn't get to write. I'd sit in the garage socket, wrench in hand, staring at the Civic while the clock pushed past midnight. The house was too quiet without her music in the background, without her voice asking if I wanted coffee. When she did come home, it was late, and her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. She smelled like bars I wasn't invited to, like nights I wasn't a part of. The drift wasn't loud or sudden. It was subtle, steady, like a tide pulling her farther out each time she left. Then came Jake. I didn't know his name at first, just the bartender at her favorite spot downtown. Six-pack abs under a tight t-shirt, the kind of guy who flexed without realizing it, or maybe because he always did. Loud laugh, shallow charm, the kind of presence that filled a room fast, but faded just as quickly once he walked out. I noticed his name creeping into her stories. Jake said this, or Jake's hilarious. At first I brushed it off, just a bartender she and her friends joked with. But then the inside jokes weren't with me anymore. She'd come home humming songs from the jukebox I hadn't heard her play in years. One night I picked her up outside that bar. Jake leaned against the door, tossing her a grin like he'd already won. She laughed too loud at something he said, slid into the passenger seat, and didn't look at me once on the ride home. Mike was supposed to be my brother. We'd known each other since high school. Friday night, football, cheap beer in the back of a pickup, the kind of bond you think can't be shaken. But after that night, I started noticing the cracks. He was spending more time downtown, always at the bar, where Jake worked, always where Lauren was. At first, he'd tell me casually, "Yeah, we all grabbed drinks last night. You should have come." But the invite never came before, only after. Then came the post selfies with Lauren, captions like "Wild Crew" or "No drama, just good times." The comments stacked up and everyone felt like a push further out. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the ease, the way he slid into her circle like he'd been waiting for the seat to open. The guy I trusted most now laughing at her side while I was left outside looking in. Sarah used to lean on me. I was the one she called after her last breakup, the guy who sat with her on the porch until sunrise while she cried and swore she'd never go back. She once told me I was the only one who actually listened. That version of her vanished quick. At first, it was small things. Texts that took hours to get a reply. Calls sent straight to voicemail. "Sorry, I've been busy." Followed by pictures of her out with Lauren and Jake tagged in neon-lit bars I'd never stepped foot in. Eventually, the replies stopped altogether. My name disappeared from her notifications, but there she was in theirs, smiling next to the people who had no problem laughing at my expense. Ghosting isn't sudden. It's gradual, like turning down the volume until silence feels normal. Sarah didn't just stop answering. She stopped remembering the version of me who once mattered. Then there was Tom. Out of everyone, I thought he'd at least stand neutral in a way that meant something. This was the guy who crashed on my couch for months when he had nowhere to go. I fed him, loaned him gas money, helped him land his first real job. If loyalty meant anything, it should have meant something to him. But when the split happened, Tom went quiet. He didn't defend me. He didn't defend her. He just slipped into the shadows like it wasn't his business. When I asked where he stood, he shrugged. "Man, I don't take sides." But silence is a side, and every time I saw him sitting with them laughing softly, nodding along, pretending he was invisible, I understood exactly which side he'd taken. It wasn't the words that cut. It was the absence. The way someone who owed you everything could decide that saying nothing was easier than standing up. It hit me one night, sitting alone in the garage, the Civic silent, under its tarp. I hadn't just lost Lauren, I'd lost the whole circle that made up my 20s. Mike, Sarah, Tom. People who once filled my weekends, who knew every stupid story, every scar, every plan I ever talked about. Gone. It wasn't loud. No screaming matches, no ultimatums, just a slow fade until I was outside the frame completely. They laughed together in bars where I wasn't welcome, toasted memories I wasn't part of anymore, built new inside jokes that erased mine. I kept waiting for someone to check in to say, "Man, that was wrong. We've got your back." The message never came. The silence was its own verdict. And in that quiet, I realized something colder than heartbreak betrayal doesn't always show up with knives and shouting. Sometimes it's just watching the people you trusted most walk away without looking back. That first night dragged on like a sentence with no period. I lay flat on my back, staring at the ceiling fan, turning slow circles, each rotation marking time I couldn't get back. The sheets felt heavy, the house too quiet, every creak of the floorboard sounding like an echo of the laughter from the bar. I replayed it over and over, the smirk on Lauren's face, Mike raising his glass, Sarah whispering like she'd predicted it all, Tom refusing to meet my eyes. It looped in my head like a broken reel, each detail sharper the longer I thought about it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stayed awake, my body stiff, my mind refusing to shut down. Sleep wouldn't come because the betrayal wasn't finished in me yet. They had laughed once, but in the dark, I heard it again and again. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, I promised myself I would never be their punchline again. The ceiling turned into a movie screen and the bar played on repeat, whether I wanted it to or not. The neon glow, the sticky floor, the way Lauren cleared her throat like she'd rehearsed it, savoring every second before she delivered the line. I cheated. I saw Mike's grin freeze into place before breaking into laughter, beer foaming over the rim. I heard Sarah's whisper, sharp as glass. We all saw this coming. And Tom, always. Tom staring at the condensation sliding down his glass instead of at me. Each replay got slower, heavier, as if my mind wanted to torture me with the angles I hadn't noticed. In the moment, the twitch of Lauren's lip, the quick flash of relief in her eyes when the others sided with her, like she'd gambled everything and won. I lay there in the dark, heart pounding, teeth clenched, watching humiliation turn into fuel. By dawn, I knew silence wouldn't be my weakness anymore. Lying there in the dark, it finally clicked. They thought my silence was surrender. The calm way I left that bar wasn't strength in their eyes. It was proof I had no fight in me. They mistook restraint for weakness, composure for defeat, and that misunderstanding burned hotter than any insult could. I replayed the sound of their laughter, the casual betrayal in every glance across that table. To them, I was disposable, the quiet guy who wouldn't push back, the friend too easy to leave behind. They thought walking away meant I was finished. But silence isn't weakness. Silence is strategy. It's the breath before the swing, the stillness before the storm. As the sun broke through the blinds, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't waste a second begging for loyalty or chasing validation. If they believed I had nothing left, then I would build something so undeniable that when they finally looked back, they wouldn't recognize me. By the time the sunlight spilled across the floor, I knew what had to happen. No more replaying their laughter, no more begging the past to make sense. If they saw me as disposable, then I would become unforgettable. Not to them, not for revenge alone, but for myself. I sat up, swung my feet onto the cold hardwood, and stared at the man in the mirror across the room. Tired eyes, unshaven face, shoulders hunched under the weight of their judgment. That version of me had died the moment I walked out of that bar. So I made the decision. I would rebuild. Every insult, every smirk, every laugh would be fuel. I wouldn't fight for their approval. I would become someone who didn't need it. Someone undeniable. Someone they couldn't laugh at, couldn't dismiss, couldn't reach. And the best part, they wouldn't see it coming. Silence had written me off. Discipline would write me back in. The first step was cutting the noise. I opened my phone thumb, hovering over apps that once felt like lifelines. One by one, I deleted them. Instagram gone. Facebook deactivated. Twitter erased. Every scroll was a reminder of people who weren't mine anymore, so I shut the door on all of it. Next came the contacts. Lauren's name, Mike, Sarah, Tom, blocked. Not muted, not ignored, blocked. Their voices would never slip through my silence again. Each tap felt like pulling a nail out of my skin. Then the photos. Hundreds of snapshots of moments that once felt permanent, late-night drives, birthdays, dumb selfies in the garage. My thumb hovered on a few, tempted to keep them, but nostalgia is poison. Delete all. The screen went blank, memory wiped clean, and for the first time in months, I felt lighter. Not healed, not yet, but free enough to start. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to burn the bridge completely. After wiping my phone clean, I walked into the bathroom and flicked on the light. The mirror didn't lie. A man stared back at me, shoulders slumped, eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night, jaw tight with words I never spoke. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity is useless. Pity keeps you stuck. What I needed was inventory. I looked at the sag in my frame, the extra weight from late nights and cheap food. I saw the faded hoodie that smelled like her perfume, the stubble that made me look more tired than tough. Every flaw was listed like items on a ledger. Weakness wasn't something to hide anymore. It was something to measure, something to burn down. I leaned closer, gripped the sink, and told myself out loud, this isn't who I'm staying. This is who I'm leaving. No pity, no excuses. Just a blueprint for the man they'd never recognize again. That afternoon, I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't dialed in years. Professor Harris. Back in college, he was the only one who ever looked me in the eye and said, "You've got CEO energy. Don't waste it." At the time, I laughed it off. Now I needed to hear it again. The line clicked, his voice older but still sharp. Well, haven't heard from you in a while. I told him everything briefly, not the drama, just the truth. I was starting over. I wanted direction. For a moment, there was silence. Then he said, "Good. About time you stop fixing cars that don't run and start building something that does. Enroll in my cybersecurity night course. You'll thank me later." No pity in his tone, no surprise, just belief. And in that moment, I borrowed some of his belief because I didn't have enough of my own yet. That evening, I sat at my desk with the glow of my laptop filling the room. The silence felt heavier than ever, but this time it wasn't empty, it was focused. I pulled up the university's continuing education site and found the listing Professor Harris had mentioned Cybersecurity Fundamentals evening course. My finger hovered over the enroll button. It felt bigger than a class. It felt like a line in the sand. I thought about the nights wasted at that bar, the laughter, the smirk, the betrayal. Then I hit submit. Payment processed. Confirmation email. Just like that, the first brick in my new foundation was set. Classes started Monday at 6 p.m. Sharp. No excuses. I wrote it on the calendar, circled it in red, and taped it to the wall above my desk. For the first time in months, I wasn't replaying what I'd lost. I was plotting what I'd build. The alarm went off at 5 sharp, its buzz tearing through the quiet. For a moment, my body begged me to stay under the covers to roll over and sleep off the weight of everything. But promises made in the dark don't mean anything if you can't keep them in the morning. I laced up my worn-out sneakers, stepped outside, and the Midwest air hit me like a slap, cold, damp, heavy with fog. The streetlights glowed faintly through the haze halos floating above the pavement. My breath came out in clouds as I started slow, each step echoing against the silence of a town still asleep. My lungs burned before I reached the corner. My legs screamed before the first mile, but I kept going. Every stride was a rejection of who I'd been the night before. Every inhale proof that pain wasn't punishment, it was progress. By the time the sun broke through the fog, I was still running. The runs were only part of it. The harder battle started in the kitchen. I cleared the shelves. No chips, no frozen dinners, no late-night takeout menus taped to the fridge. In their place, chicken rice, vegetables, water. Simple, clean fuel instead of comfort. Cutting carbs hit me like a hammer. The first week felt brutal headaches, cravings, that hollow ache in my stomach that whispered, just one burger won't hurt. But every time the urge came, I thought of Lauren's smirk, of Mike's laugh, of Sarah's silence. That hunger turned into discipline. My body pushed back hard, muscles sore, energy drained, skin breaking out, as if purging the past from my pores. But each morning I woke up, looked in the mirror, and reminded myself, this isn't punishment, it's rebuilding. Every clean meal was a brick. Every craving resisted was a wall raised higher. And slowly, meal by meal, I started to feel less like I was starving and more like I was sharpening. By day, I was running networks for small shops. By night, I was back in a classroom that smelled faintly of dry erase markers and burnt coffee. The glow of the projector washed over rows of tired faces, but none looked more wrecked than mine. My eyes were bloodshot veins spiderwebbing from too many hours awake and too much caffeine keeping me upright. The professor's voice cut through the haze firewalls, encryption penetration testing. Words I'd read before but now sank in differently. This wasn't theory anymore. This was survival. Every note I scribbled in the margins felt like ammunition. The clock on the wall ticked past 9 past 10. Most nights I fought the urge to drop my pen, pack up, and disappear back into the silence. But then I remembered why I was here. Every page filled was another step away from who they thought I was. Exhausted, wired, shaking hands on a coffee cup, I stayed, because the old me would have quit. It started with a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. A small law firm on the edge of town, 3 partners, 1 dusty office, and a network that kept crashing whenever they tried to print. Hardly glamorous, but it was a start. I showed up in a plain, button-down toolbox in hand, the smell of old carpet and stale coffee greeting me as I walked through their door. Their receptionist looked surprised I was on time. The partners looked even more surprised when I fixed what their IT guy had been patching badly for months in less than an hour. It wasn't big money, not even close. But when they handed me the check, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Validation is that didn't come from friends or girlfriends, but from work, from skill. They said, "We'll keep your number." I nodded calm on the outside. But inside, I knew this was the first brick in something bigger. That first gig opened a door I didn't even know was waiting. A week later, the law firm called again, bigger issue, this time a full network overhaul. We signed a simple contract, nothing flashy, but it was the first time my name sat on paper as the guy responsible. When the job was done, one of the partners mentioned me to a friend who ran a small accounting office. Suddenly, I was troubleshooting their servers on a Tuesday night. That turned into a call from a dentist's office across town. Each step felt small, but they stacked fast. The moment that hit hardest was when a client slid an envelope across the desk. Inside, a retainer check. Real money paid in advance because they trusted I'd keep their systems alive. I tucked it into my jacket, kept my face calm, but walking out into the cold air, I felt taller. For the first time, survival was turning into momentum. At first, I measured progress in hours, how many late nights I could stack without breaking, how many mornings I could run without quitting. But soon progress had numbers attached. I opened my bank app one Friday and froze. In a single month, I'd cleared more than my old paycheck at the call center, twice as much if I counted the retainer work lined up for the next week. It wasn't luck. It was sweat. It was saying yes when I was dead tired, showing up when others canceled, refusing to cut corners. Every invoice I sent was proof I was no longer the guy they mocked at that bar. I sat there at my desk, no crowd cheering, no one patting my back. Just me, the glow of the screen, and a number that said louder than words, "You're building something real." For the first time, I didn't feel behind. I felt ahead. The money was steady enough now that it was time to put structure around it. No more side hustle, no more scribbled invoices on Word templates. I sat at my kitchen table late one night, laptop open, state website pulled up. I filled in the forms, carefully name, address, business purpose, each field feeling heavier than the last. When I hit submit, it was official, my own LLC. The next step was presence. I didn't need flashy graphics or a brand kit. I needed credibility. I built a single-page website, white background, clean font, a short list of services, and an email form that worked. No fluff, no ego, just a digital handshake. When I pressed publish, the site went live without fanfare, no audience clapping in the dark. But I stared at the screen and felt it anyway, a shift. I wasn't just some guy fixing problems anymore. I was building something that carried my name, and it was mine. It happened quietly, almost anticlimactic. One morning, I opened my laptop, sipped black coffee, and there it was, an email from a business I'd never heard of. Subject line, IT. Support inquiry. My heart jumped. Someone had found me, not the other way around. By the end of the week, there were 3 more. A bakery needing their point of sale fixed. A small clinic struggling with their Wi-Fi. A contractor who wanted to set up secure cloud storage. All strangers, all reaching out to me. I answered every message like it was life or death. Polite, professional, quick. And each reply brought another job, another check, another reminder that I wasn't chasing anymore. The work was finding me. Sitting there in the glow of my inbox, I realized this was the pivot. Not begging for scraps, not explaining myself to people who doubted me. Just demand, steady quiet, undeniable demand for the skills I'd built in silence. My calendar became a battlefield. Blocks of meetings stacked on top of service calls, projects, bleeding into late-night troubleshooting sessions. I worked 12, sometimes 14 hours straight, the kind of grind that would have broken me before. Now it built me. Mornings started with a run, evenings ended with a laptop glow, and in between, there was no space for doubt. I ate meals standing at the counter. Half my clothes smelled like sweat or soldering, and my phone never stopped buzzing. Clients wanted fixes, updates, reassurances. I gave them all of it. Exhaustion was constant, eyes heavy, wrists sore, back aching from hours hunched over. But underneath it was something new, pride. Every long day was proof that I wasn't who they thought I was. Every invoice sent, every contract signed was a nail sealing the coffin of the version of me they mocked. They laughed at the guy in the bar. They didn't know the man being built in the dark. The strangest part was how the hours erased them. I used to wake up replaying their faces, their laughter that night at the bar. Now I barely had the energy to think about anything beyond the next task. Wake up, run, work, eat, work more, sleep, repeat. Their names would flash in my head sometimes, Lauren, Mike, Sarah, Tom, but they didn't sting the way they used to. They felt like background noise, static, fading in and out, too faint to compete with the constant hum of my new routine. My days were consumed by tickets, deadlines, and systems that demanded attention. My nights by lectures, labs, and notes scribbled until the ink ran dry. When your schedule is stacked wall to wall, nostalgia can't squeeze in. It wasn't healing in the traditional sense. It was something harder, colder. I didn't forgive them. I just stopped carrying them. And when there's no room left in your life for ghosts, they eventually stop haunting you. By the 3rd month, the scale told a story my mirror was just beginning to catch. 18 pounds gone. The gut that used to push against my shirts flattened into something leaner, tighter. My face looked sharper cheekbones cutting through where soft edges used to be. The gym became another battlefield. I started with shaky reps, barely able to push the bar without trembling. But I showed up every day, 6 in the morning, the clang of iron plates echoing in the cold air. Sweat burned through my shirts, hands blistered from deadlifts, legs shaking after squats. Little by little, discipline carved me out of myself. Strangers started holding doors, nodding at me, like I belonged in the space I once felt invisible in. The mirror wasn't lying anymore. I could see it. The man who was mocked at that bar was vanishing. In his place stood someone harder, stronger, forged out of hunger, discipline, and hours no one else saw. One night, after another 14-hour grind, I stepped out of the shower and caught my reflection in the fogged bathroom mirror. For a second, I didn't recognize the man staring back. The softness was gone, jawline cut sharp shoulders, broader eyes no longer tired but steady, locked in. I wiped the steam away and leaned closer. This wasn't the guy who sat at that bar, swallowing humiliation. This wasn't the man who begged for loyalty that never came. He was gone, buried under the miles I'd run, the weights I'd lifted, the hours I'd bled into my work. I smirked an expression that felt foreign on my own face. Would Lauren even know me now? Would Mike, Sarah, Tom? It didn't matter. Recognition wasn't the point. Reinvention was. I pressed both palms against the counter and whispered to the glass, "You're not him anymore." And for the first time, I believed it. The old me was gone. After months of sweat and grind, I decided it was time to sharpen the outside to match the inside. I booked a haircut, not the cheap buzz I'd settled for, but a real cut. The barber trimmed away months of neglect, shaping me into someone I almost didn't recognize. Clean lines, tapered sides, a look that said I belonged in boardrooms, not just server rooms. From there, I walked into a department store and tried on a suit. Not off-the-rack sloppy, but tailored, close the fabric-hugging shoulders that had finally earned their size. When I buttoned the jacket and looked in the mirror, I froze. The man staring back wasn't invisible. He was undeniable. It wasn't vanity, it was respect. For the hours no one saw, for the discipline I bled into every rep, every lecture, every gig. The suit wasn't for them. It was for me. A uniform for a life I was finally building on my own terms. It happened on an ordinary night. I was walking downtown, suit jacket still crisp from a client meeting, the cool Midwest air, carrying the smell of fried food and car exhaust. As I passed a storefront, the glass caught me. I stopped. For a moment, I didn't recognize the man staring back. Broad shoulders, clean-cut eyes, steady instead of restless. No hoodie, no grease-stained jeans, just presence. I tilted my head, studying him like a stranger, and then the question slipped in. Would she even know me now? Lauren, with her smirk and her barroom stage? The friends who cheered her on, what would they see if they walked past this window? Would they pause? Would they choke on their laughter? The thought made me smile, but not in triumph. It wasn't about her anymore. Recognition wasn't the prize. Reinvention was. I turned from the glass keys in hand and kept walking. I didn't need her to know me. I needed me to. It was a small networking mixer at a downtown hotel. Nothing fancy, cheap, wine, name tags peeling at the edges, a room full of handshakes that felt more like auditions. I worked the floor anyway, traded cards, listened more than I spoke. No one knew the backstory, no one cared, and that was liberating. A week later, my phone buzzed. Not with messages from them, this was different. A notification I'd been tagged in a photo. Someone had posted a group shot from the event. There I was, suit pressed, posture solid, smiling like I belonged. The comments rolled in from people I didn't know, and then the dominoes started to fall. Because if I was in that photo, others would see it too. People who hadn't thought about me since the night I walked out of that bar. For the first time, I wasn't invisible online. My silence hadn't vanished me. It had set the stage. The next event wasn't about business at all. It was a local charity 5K, the kind of Saturday morning race where half the town showed up in matching t-shirts. Months earlier, I wouldn't have made it past the first mile. But now, standing at the starting line, shoes laced tight, lungs ready, I felt different. The course wound through neighborhoods and ended by the river. I pushed hard legs, burning sweat pouring down my back. When I crossed the finish line, I wasn't first, not even close, but I wasn't broken either. I was standing tall, breathing steady, alive. Someone snapped a photo of me grinning under the finish banner medal, hanging cheap but proud around my neck. Hours later, it was online, tagged, shared, floating through circles I hadn't touched in months. And I knew it was only a matter of time before the wrong people saw it. Not clients, not strangers. Them. It started with a buzz on my phone late one evening. I glanced down, half expecting another client update. Instead, the name on the screen stopped me cold. Sarah, the girl who'd once ghosted me without a second thought. The first line of her message was almost casual. "Hey stranger," 2 words. Harmless on the surface, but loaded with everything she hadn't said before. Suddenly, I could picture her seeing that charity run photo, the one with me standing tall under the finish banner. I imagined her thumb hovering over the keyboard, debating if reaching out would make her look weak. The irony wasn't lost on me. Months earlier, my silence was weakness in their eyes. Now it was gravity, pulling them back, making them curious, restless. I didn't reply. I locked the phone, set it face down on the table, and let the message sit there like an echo from a past I had already buried. A few days after Sarah's message, another name lit up my phone, one I hadn't seen since the night at the bar. Mike, my so-called brother. The text was short, almost casual. "Heard you started your own thing." That's wild. Respect. I stared at the screen, remembering the sound of his laugh as he clinked glasses with Lauren, cheering on my humiliation. Now here he was, acting like time had folded in on itself, like we could just pick up where we left off. It wasn't respect. It was curiosity, maybe envy, maybe regret, but not respect. Respect doesn't come after betrayal. It dies with it. I didn't type back. My silence spoke louder than any reply ever could. I wasn't the man he mocked anymore, but I wasn't his friend either. Whatever bond we'd had was broken beyond repair. I set the phone down, steady hand, steady heart. If Mike wanted recognition, he could keep waiting. Not long after Mike's text, another notification slid across my screen. Tom, the man who once slept on my couch, who claimed neutrality while standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who laughed at me. His message was as flimsy as the excuses he used to make. "Dude, your name came up in a client meeting. You're killing it, right?" I read it twice, not because it mattered, but because it was so empty. No apology, no acknowledgement, just curiosity disguised as casual praise. Like my success was small talk, like betrayal could be brushed over with a compliment. For a second, I wondered if he even remembered that night, the way he couldn't look me in the eye, tapping condensation on his glass while I drowned in humiliation. Now, suddenly, he wanted a piece of the story I had written without him. I locked the phone, no reply. Tom didn't deserve my words. My silence was enough. The messages kept stacking, buzzing, one after another, little digital taps on the shoulder begging me to turn around. Sarah reaching for small talk. Mike pretending respect. Tom fishing for validation. Each one thought they deserved a reply, a piece of the man they once left behind. But I gave them nothing. No texts, no calls, no explanations. I scrolled read, then closed the screen. Silence became my sharpest answer. It wasn't easy at first. Old habits wanted me to defend myself, to prove I'd grown, to show them the man they underestimated. But that's what they wanted to be included in my rebuild, to make my progress part of their story. So I starved them of it. No closure, no comfort, no access. Just a locked phone and a quiet resolve. They had killed the version of me they knew at that bar. I buried him, and I wasn't about to dig him up for them again. For months after the breakup, Lauren's life had been a performance. Soft-lit selfies with Jake behind the bar. Captions about real love and new beginnings. Mutual friends reposting her nights out, tagging her in every moment she wanted the world to see. But then the feed began to thin. A post every few days became once a week. The captions lost their shine, shorter, vaguer, like she was running out of lines. Then came the silence. No smiling photos, no new stories. Just gaps where her need for attention used to flood the screen. It was strange to notice, but I couldn't help it. Not because I missed her, but because the absence itself was loud. The girl who needed the world to clap for her suddenly had nothing to share. I didn't screenshot. I didn't send it around. I just noted the shift and set my phone down. The stage she built was crumbling, and I didn't need to watch the collapse. One night, scrolling half out of habit, half out of boredom, I caught it, a story posted by a mutual friend at some birthday party downtown. The clip was shaky music, too loud, people dancing, drinks spilling. And then in the background, almost out of frame, there she was, Lauren, sitting alone on a couch, head tilted down, phone in her hands. No Jake draped across her shoulder. No circle of friends orbiting around her. Hurrah. Just her blurred by cheap camera quality and dim lights looking smaller than I remembered. No caption, no glittering emoji hearts. No performance. Just a moment she hadn't meant for me to see, but I saw it anyway. I waited for the old feeling to hit, the rush of vindication, the smug satisfaction. It never came. Instead, I felt nothing. Detached. Because the truth was clear, she wasn't my problem anymore. Her silence wasn't my victory. My silence was. The image stuck with me for a minute, Lauren alone in that blurry frame, no caption to spin the story, no Jake in sight to play the part of her prize, just silence where the applause used to be. I thought it would light something in me. Satisfaction. Triumph. The kind of smug relief people talk about when karma finally swings around. But it didn't. Instead, all I felt was distance. No caption meant no script. No Jake meant no act. But it also meant none of it mattered anymore. She wasn't shining, she wasn't winning, but I wasn't keeping score either. The scoreboard burned down the night I walked out of that bar. For the first time, I realized the fight was over, not because she lost, but because I stopped playing. There was no revenge in my chest, no celebration in her stumble, just clarity. Whatever happened to her wasn't mine to carry. I was done. I set the phone down after seeing that story and sat in the quiet of my apartment. No racing heart, no victory grin, just a strange calm that settled over me like dust. For months, I had imagined this moment, the fall, the unraveling, the proof that leaving me wasn't the upgrade she bragged about. But when it finally arrived, there was no thrill, no sense of payback, only closure I didn't even need. Because the truth had already been written, the man she left behind was gone, and the man who replaced him had no reason to look back. I leaned against the window, watching the gray Midwest sky stretch over the rooftops, and whispered it out loud, almost surprised by how natural it felt. I'm done. Not broken. Not bitter. Just finished with the weight of her, with the shadow of them. Done carrying a story that no longer belonged to me. Sunday came quiet, the kind of Midwest gray that makes the whole sky look tired. I brewed a pot of drip coffee, the smell filling the apartment, and dropped onto the couch with ESPN reruns flickering on the screen. Background noise. Familiar. Safe. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. No late-night echoes of the bar. No restless urge to check my phone. Just the hum of a morning that belonged to me. I poured coffee into a chipped mug, steam curling into the air, and let the silence settle. Then my phone lit up. Once, twice, again. A steady buzz rattling against the table, cutting through the comfort like static. Call after call, name after name piling one on top of another. 32 missed calls in less than 2 hours. I stared at the screen, the numbers climbing, the silence breaking. The people who once laughed at me were suddenly desperate to be heard. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing, vibrating against the table like it was alive. I finally picked it up, the screen blinding against the gray morning light. 32 missed calls. The number glared at me, stacked in red, all from names I hadn't seen in months. Lauren, again and again. Then Mike. Then Sarah. Even Tom. The same people who toasted my humiliation, who left me standing alone now, couldn't stop reaching for me. I didn't answer. I just let the phone ring, watched their desperation pile up like unpaid bills. The sound filled the room, but instead of panic, I felt something else control. For once, I wasn't the one chasing, begging, explaining. I was the one choosing silence. I set the phone face down on the table, poured another cup of coffee, and turned up the volume on the game rerun. If they wanted my attention, they could keep dialing. My peace was worth more than their apologies. After the calls came the texts. First one, then another, then a wall of them stacking on my lock screen. The same names, the same ghosts. Mike's message was the first I actually read. We were wrong, man. Real talk. Wrong. The word almost made me laugh. Wrong wasn't clinking glasses while Lauren dismantled me in front of everyone. Wrong wasn't staying silent while I walked out alone. Wrong was too small for what they'd done. Still, the flood kept coming. Lines of regret dressed up as apologies, half excuses wrapped in nostalgia. They wanted me to believe they didn't know the truth, that they'd been tricked. Maybe that's what they told themselves to sleep at night. I sat back, coffee cooling in my hand, and let the screen fill up. For months, my silence had been weakness in their eyes. Now it was power driving them insane as they realized the door they slammed shut wasn't opening again. Mike's second message hit harder, not because I cared, but because it was predictable. She lied to us, man. Said you weren't treating her right. I didn't know the truth. I read it twice, shaking my head. That was his defense. That he believed her without a question. That years of brotherhood meant less than one smirk and a well-placed story. He wasn't blind. He was willing. Willing to laugh, willing to drink, willing to turn my life into entertainment because it was easier than standing beside me. The truth is, betrayal rarely hides behind lies. It hides behind convenience. Mike didn't care if it was true. He cared that siding with her kept his nights fun and his circle intact. Now, when the fun had dried up, when the circle had cracked suddenly, the truth mattered again. But for me, it was too late. His excuses didn't erase the echo of that glass he raised in her honor. Not long after Mike's excuses, Sarah's messages started pouring in. The first line read, "I was a coward." I sat there watching the typing bubble appear and disappear, like she couldn't decide how much truth to spill. Then it came in fragments. "You were always the real one." I knew it, but I stayed quiet. I didn't want to lose the group. I didn't want to be the outcast. Coward. She had the right word for herself. She chose comfort over loyalty, applause over integrity. She cried on my shoulder, once swore I was the only one who listened. And when it was my turn, she closed her mouth and blended into the laughter. Now she wanted to call it fear, as if that softened the betrayal. But silence cuts as deep as lies. Her confession wasn't for me, it was for her conscience, and I wasn't about to carry that weight for her. I locked the screen, unmoved. Then came the messages I knew would arrive one day. Lauren's name lit up the screen, her words spilling out like a dam had broken. Jake left. He cheated. He's broke. I'm broke. I miss you. God, I miss you. Line after line, she unraveled in real time. No smirk, no stage, no applause, just desperation typed in the glow of a phone screen. She wanted me to believe she finally saw my worth, but all I could read was loss. Loss of money, loss of validation, loss of the spotlight she once basked in. She wasn't reaching for me. She was reaching for the version of herself that existed when I believed in her. The girl who felt anchored, who felt at peace when I held her steady. But that version was gone. She killed it the night she turned my pain into a performance. And now, no apology, no plea, could resurrect it. Man 6. Ket thuk nivdifime 60. I scrolled through every message line after line, her voice bleeding through the screen. Apologies, regrets. Promises she couldn't keep, even if she meant them. She begged for 5 minutes for a chance to explain, for a response, any response. But I gave her nothing. Not anger, not forgiveness, not even acknowledgement, just silence. I sat there with the phone heavy in my hand, the room filled with the quiet hum of the fridge and the muffled noise of the game rerun. Her desperation filled the screen, but it didn't fill me. I felt no rush, no vindication, only distance. I realized then that silence wasn't the absence of words. It was a verdict, a final judgment sharper than any argument could be. She had once used an audience to wound me. Now she was shouting into an empty room, and I wasn't about to step inside. I set the phone on the table screen, still glowing, and just watched. Her name kept flashing at the top, another message incoming. The 3 little dots appeared, typing, hesitating, deleting, typing again. A desperate rhythm of someone who didn't know what words could fix what she had broken. Then the bubble vanished. Silence. A pause that stretched long enough to feel like its own confession. She didn't know what to say anymore. Once they all thought my silence was weakness, that walking away without a scene meant I had no fight in me. Now it was the opposite. My refusal to answer had become a wall. She couldn't climb, a mirror she couldn't stand to look into. I didn't need to send paragraphs or lectures. I didn't need revenge spelled out in anger. All I had to do was nothing, and the nothing drove her mad. I picked up my coffee calm. She could keep chasing ghosts. I picked up the phone and stared at the blank message box. My thumbs hovered over the screen, steady, deliberate. No anger bubbled up, no urge to scream in all caps, just clarity. Slowly I typed the words that had been sitting in me since that night. You celebrated humiliating me. I'm just done. I read it once, twice. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even sharp. It was the truth stripped bare of theatrics. For once, I didn't need her to understand. I didn't need her to hurt. I just needed it to end. With a deep breath, I hit send. The bubble appeared on her side, instantly typing, stopping, starting again, but I didn't wait to see the reply. My finger hovered for only a second before sliding up and pressing block contact. Her number vanished from my screen. My silence was permanent now, not a pause. A period. The closing line to a story I no longer lived in. The confirmation was instant. Her number erased her access cutoff. One tap and the lifeline she kept tugging on was gone forever. No more calls, no more bubbles, just silence. I set the phone face down on the table, the glow of the screen fading into nothing. For months, that device had been a portal to humiliation, to betrayal, to noise I never asked for. Tonight it became a wall, a shield. The room felt different, lighter, as if blocking her didn't just mute a contact, it muted a ghost. I stretched out on the couch, coffee still warm in my chest, ESPN still mumbling in the background. My eyelids grew heavy, but for once it wasn't exhaustion. It was calm. She could scream into the void, send messages that would never land. But me, I was already gone, already sleeping. And that sleep, undisturbed and quiet, was worth more than any revenge. For the first time in what felt like years, I lay down, without the weight of unfinished words pressing against my chest. No replay of the bar, no echoes of their laughter, no buzzing phone daring me to pick it up, just silence, heavy and honest, wrapping around me like a blanket. I closed my eyes, listening to the steady rhythm of my own breathing, the hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the faint announcer's voice drifting from the TV. Ordinary sounds, but they felt sacred. They belonged to me. Sleep came quick, clean, without struggle. Not the restless half-dreams of a man haunted, but the deep, full rest of someone who had chosen his own peace over someone else's chaos. While they spun in regret, crafting apologies and excuses I would never read, I slept. And in that sleep was the quiet truth. The best kind of revenge isn't fire. It's finally being able to close your eyes without looking back. Morning light spilled across the room, warm and steady. I stretched, stood, and realized something had shifted. Not in them, not in the past, but in me. The version of myself they mocked was gone, buried under discipline, rebuilt with silence, resurrected in strength they would never touch. And as I poured a fresh cup of coffee, I said it out loud, letting the words close the book. Revenge isn't always fire. Sometimes it's never looking back. That was it. No dramatic finale, no grand explosion, just a man who chose peace over chaos, forward over backward. So if this story hit you, if it made you think about the weight you've carried or the lines you've drawn, don't just scroll past. Hit like, hit subscribe, and drop your truth in the comments. What boundary saved your peace? Because every betrayal has consequences, and sometimes the quietest ones leave the loudest echoes.